All right. Welcome back, you cool cats and kittens. This is your Commissioner Tim with the Week 6 Power Rankings. Looking at standings after Week 5, we've got Ryan Lenihan with the Brady's Third Dynasty sitting atop solo with a commanding 4-1 over 4 teams sitting at 3-2 with Chota as well as Full Chub or Half Chub and the Trust of Process sitting below winning records. Looking at points for the league, we're looking at this sort of column week in, week out. I think this column is going to be starting to become less relevant as we head into sort of the bye weeks. But even for now, I'll put Bills Mafia sitting there. I think he's going to be able to continue to sort of climb up through the charts, especially after his acquisition of Austin Ekeler in the past week. We are now in week 6. Which means that we are now officially in bye week territory. And so this third column that we're going to start looking at now is the max points for. And what this represents is essentially the total max amount of points you could have scored with the best 10 starters on your roster should you have picked correctly across the board for all 10 starters on your roster. So this actually shows you in our league the depth of the roster of our managers across the board. And as we head into the bye weeks, certainly teams with higher max points for is more likely, theoretically, to be able to continue their high performance all throughout the seasons as players have to be swapped out week in and week out with their bye weeks. So I think this is actually a pretty stellar roster and a metric that we'll be using as you already see the 4 teams who happen to be at the top of our league, and also the 4 teams that I have as favorites for the playoff seeding, as you'll see in the power rankings coming shortly, that it represents the 4 teams, and then all the other teams sort of fall below there. All right, I'm going to move over into the power rankings, and we're going to start at 8, and this was painful to do because when I got to 8th last week, I thought I would just be staying and be calm and just chilling at the bottom of the cellar for the rest of the season. But I have to put Chota here after week 5. It was not only a bad week, but with a star player like Saquon Barkley now being out potentially multiple weeks, maybe 2, maybe up to 4, I think it does get challenging, especially with Chota with the losing record already, and his push for playoffs. I think it does get severely impacted. And having a star player like Saquon, who finally looked like he was healthy, having a low ankle sprain and this fluke of an injury early in the game, I think was the factor that caused me to move Chota down after week 5, heading into week 6, which means Trust the Process moves up just 1 by default, especially after scoring 150 points. Just moving up there, even though I have the worst record in the league. And I also have Half Chub moving up a spot because of that, now sitting at 6. I do believe Chota is going to continue to be able to move upwards, though, especially if Saquon comes back. I do also have faith in Half Chub's roster be able to sort of move up as well, depending on how things break down, as what I've mentioned in our recap video earlier yesterday. At 5, I have Ben. And this is after a bad performance in week 5. And also, it's really not necessarily about that Ben's team looks worse in an absolute format. But from a relative format, especially with the moves that Brandon has made in acquiring Austin Ekeler and already a pretty stellar team to begin with, I have to push Brandon up into the top 4 category as a playoff seeding favorite, just because of the acquisition and obviously his performance in week 5, scoring over 170 points for the first time this season, certainly showed that shrewd move that allowed him to sort of rise up to the power rankings. All right, so that brings me to Bills Mafia sitting at 4. I think Bills Mafia may feel like with the Austin Ekeler acquisition, they deserve to be maybe moved up more. But the reality is, I think the top 3 teams, obviously Adam, Ryan, and Eves, it's just really hard to have them move down unless shown otherwise. And all 4 of these teams, including Bills Mafia, certainly got the win in week 5. So it just makes it really, really hard for me to have Bills Mafia moving up until we see maybe multiple weeks of these really great high scoring 160, 170 point type of outings week in, week out. But again, all three of these remaining teams scored over that 165 sort of clip across the board. So the top three really stays the same for me, although I do have some movements. I'll start with the Washington Fantasy Football Team. Sitting at 3 last week, I'm going to have them sitting at 3 for this week. Again, it's really hard to just move these teams left and right. They all had a high performance game. They all looked good. That said, I'm going to start out with the number 1 spot instead of showing you who the number 2 is. And for me, that still is, unfortunately, for Yves, the Brady's third dynasty, in my opinion. And the reason why is I mentioned this recap video on Tuesday, which was I originally thought Russell Wilson was actually going to be out 6 to 10 weeks. That's what I had originally heard. But looking back at it now, it looks like he's actually expected to come back maybe after their bye week or around week 10 or week 11, which means that Brady's third dynasty is going to not only have reduced amount of games without Russell Wilson being there, and his roster still plenty strong enough to fill in Carson Wentz and just, live out the season until Russell Wilson returns. But that also means that his probability of having an ideal outcome in playoff weeks, in week 15 and week 16, certainly aren't going to be affected by Russell Wilson, given that there's going to be plenty of weeks for him to figure out, and Russell is going to be able to get eased into that situation should he even need to, with him coming back maybe at week 11 at worst. So I really thought that Yves would be overtaking Brady's third dynasty this week because of the Russell Wilson news in particular, but I'm just going to keep the 3 as is. Again, I really do think the top 3 here are locked in playoff seeds. Now I have Bills Mafia as a favorite for that 4th seed, but certainly, as I mentioned in the recap video, I think there's multiple routes and multiple narratives and multiple paths to that 4th seed being an extremely competitive battle until even week 14. So that does it for my week 6 power rankings. Looking forward to seeing you guys on Thursday, Sunday, and Monday. Peace.